We're good. All right. Welcome, everyone. We got there. We got there. Okay. Simplified Container Apps. I want to talk tonight about container apps and Microsoft's container app platform offering. Who here has used the container apps already? Anyone already used them a little bit? Yeah, not many. Who's used Kubernetes? Yeah, a lot more. And who hasn't used any kind of containers, or apart from maybe a bit of Docker? Most. There's a few people didn't put the hand up, but it's a good. That's a good. I want to get a feel for where people are, because I can sort of tailor the talk a little bit, because container apps are obviously a DevOps thing. They're an Azure platform deployment thing. They're not a developer thing. How is it relevant to developers? Well, I'll get into that. I just wanted to see sort of where the room lies. So a lot of people here, developers, if you're, or who's in DevOps? Couple. All right, mostly developers. Okay, awesome. So why do you care about container apps when you're a developer? You're going to need to deploy apps at some point, and you've got your own home projects, and you're going to have a mandate at some point to deploy to this platform, and so you need to know what's involved with it. So I think this will be pretty helpful. It'll help you organize your code and yeah, be able to deploy. This is me anyway. I'm going to post a blog on my website at 7 o'clock, which will be this talk, most of the stuff from this talk. So if there's anything that's not clear, there'll be links to everything, explanations, all that stuff will be posted on my website there. If you want to find me on the socials, with the few socials that are there, I don't really do much on YouTube, but that's my handle, stuart.net, because I'm a .NET developer, in case that wasn't clear. So, all right, and who am I? Well, gather around, an old person's talking. I've been around a bit, done a few different things in my time. Haven't always been a developer, but I've always wanted to be a developer, and I've been playing with computers since I was very young, since I was at school and playing with Visual Basic. I made a sandwich simulator. I don't even know what that is, but that's what I made with Visual Basic. I've been coding since the olden days. But I got my Microsoft Certified Professional first time, 2005, signed by Bill Gates, and just been addicted ever since. I now kind of talk about privacy and humane technology. So what is humane technology? It's developing technology, software, as we do, in a way that's responsible and doesn't mess up society like a lot of software nowadays can do, AI and social media and things like that. So I got a big focus on that. But that's not the focus of today's talk. Tonight, I wanted to talk about container apps. So in my job, I work for a company called Setmetrics, and we create building energy modeling software. And this software, the aim is to be able to reduce the carbon emissions and the costs of every commercial building on the planet. And we have the technology to do that. And it runs on Azure, and it uses Kubernetes, it uses a web app, and it uses functions and a few other things. But one of the things it used was a virtual machine to do a lot of the orchestration of the modeling job. So it runs really heavy jobs on Kubernetes and scales up and runs all those jobs. But then a lot of that orchestration all comes down to a tiny little VM, which clogs up the whole system. And so I came in and decided that needed to change. Something needed to be done to make that better. It needed to scale, and not just scale vertically, but scale instantly and scale according to the demand of the jobs, in accordance with the jobs and where it needed to happen. So there was a lot of scaling demands. So I looked at container apps, and that's what brought me here. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about container apps. First of all, just give you a bit of an intro, and then I'm going to do a demo. And the demo is we're going to create and we're going to deploy a container app, and then we're going to create and then deploy a container app job. And I'm going to do this in a couple of different ways to show you the different ways that you can do it using Visual Studio Code, command prompt, all the different ways, so you can get a bit of a handle on doing it however you would like to do it, because it's easy. As we go through the night, we'll cover a couple of things, a couple of topics that are relevant to container apps, monitoring, scaling, ingress, but I'm not going to go too much into detail on those. I will cover them a little bit, and then I'll leave you to go away and look at them a little bit more. But this is kind of time dependent, however much time we're going to have. I'll get into that. Please ask questions. If you've got any questions, put your hand up and we'll come around to you and we'll get your questions as we go. I don't want to let anyone be left behind, and if you've got any questions, you feel like you need to clarify something or whatever, please put your hands up. Okay. Excuse me. If anyone's getting any glare off this light off the top of my head, let me know. It's pretty bright. Why do we use container apps? For me, the reason I chose to use this in my situation was because of the simplicity. It's a lot easier. I don't know if, for those of you who've used, it's fine, it's all right. For those who've used, that's okay. No, it's fine. You're okay. Yeah, no, whatever. All good. That's nice and moody. Yeah. Yeah, it's simple. There's a lot to do with Kubernetes, and like I said, we do use them for certain things, for running jobs, and there's a lot you can do with the containerization stuff, but you don't really need to worry about that as developers. We shouldn't have to deal with a lot of those intricacies if we don't have to. A lot of the time, you just want to get an app, you want to deploy it, and get it up and running, and get it on the cloud for people to look at. Container apps are also a good introduction to working with microservices. So if you want to start breaking your code down, they're a good place to start. You get the benefits of the cloud with the scaling and all the rest of it quickly and easily. This is really important if you're migrating existing software onto the cloud. And you can experiment by taking a small bit of your code and just pulling it out and then running it running it in a container app completely separately. When do we use them? Microsoft recommends for APIs, for background processing jobs, events, just running microservices in general. And that's pretty much what I've been using them for. And we'll just quickly go into the features. They're fully serverless. You can scale to 0. And if you scale down to 0, your costs are 0, which is great. If you've got a website, you may want to scale it down to 1. So it's always warm, ready to go. But you might not. Maybe you don't mind a little bit of warm-up time. But I'd recommend keeping that on 1. But if you have other kind of tasks, you can definitely scale them down to 0. You've got Dapper, which is your microservice configuration stuff. There's revisions, so you can deploy the latest version and then overwrite, and it will swap it over seamlessly. We'll get into that. You can even split the traffic between your revisions. Again, we'll get into that. And you can host your images on public or private container registries. And then there's ingress. You've got different types of ingress, network connectivity to your container apps. Limitations of container apps. The biggest one is that they're Linux containers only at the moment, which might be a big limitation. But generally, if you're making new software and you're making a .NET app in .NET 8. Yes, it is. Absolutely. So, but if you need something really specifically Windows, then you're going to have to use Kubernetes, but try your best to get off it, because these Linux containers are great. They're so much more lightweight. All right, a bit more theory, but then I'll get into the demo. Environments are a bit like app service plans for web apps. They're kind of the hosting plan. It has the operating system, the upgrades, the scaling, the balancing, load balancing. It deals with all that for you, and you can store a couple of different container apps within, or a large number of container apps within your environment. And this is all at that link at Microsoft, and it will all be in the blog too. And environments kind of have a payment plan set up where you can either run them as consumption plan, which is very similar to Azure Functions you're probably familiar with, where you just pay for how much you use, and then they have workload profiles which you can set up. You can set up a workload profile which will have a consumption plan in it, or it will have a dedicated plan in it. And a dedicated plan is just where you pre-order the hardware, you have you have a setup, and you know what you're going to pay every month. It is a bit more expensive doing it that way, but if you're going to be using it, then it might be worth considering. For what we're playing, definitely just start off with consumption. Right, let's get into it. Okay, what I might do is actually first I'll start off with Visual Studio. What we're going to do, we're going to create a new project, and the first thing I'm going to do is let's just make a basic web app and get it up online. Times it 23. Blazor app 2. I've done this once. We create the Blazor app. There's not really much to do in here. You just go through the steps. Nothing container app related, really. Let's get that up. And it keeps going to the other screen. That's right. Go on. There you go. So we got the usual Blazor app. Has anyone not seen the Blazor? Go away. The basic Blazor app demo. I'll just run it quickly just so you can see. That's huge. Get up. They'll probably. There you go. Hello world. Welcome to your app. There's a counter screen, and there's this fake API, which is all built into the app. That's pretty much all there is to it. I'll just minimize that. So how do you make a container app? Well, when you've got a Blazor app or a couple of other different project types, what you do is so who was the DevOps people? If you just close your eyes for a minute, I'm just going to do something. You don't need to see this. Okay. So just to get it up quickly, we can do this. Select the first option, Azure. The next, you'll get a list of different types of services, and you should see this Azure Container Apps 1. If you don't see it, you've probably got the wrong project type. And then what we do, it opens up your Azure subscription, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new container app. We're going to call it. Actually, we'll create a new demo 5, new resource group, and a new container app environment. I'll just call it demo 5 environment, and analytics, because you always have to have analytics with your projects nowadays. And then we'll just hit create, and that'll take a minute, and then that will deploy a resource group and your container apps environment and the container app itself. when that is done, it will continue on, and I don't know why this step is next, but there's a container registry step which will take the image of this app and store it in the container registry for the container app to use. This will take a couple of minutes. So while that's going, I just want to show you in Visual Studio a similar process, how you would do this. Might just Control Shift. Make it a bit easier to see. What we'll do here is press F1 and you can create a container app. Now, in order to get these menu items, you need to have the extensions, and that usually will involve the Azure Toolkit, which you should get. Most of this stuff, there's the Container Apps one, and also the C# Dev Kit from Microsoft, and that will help you be able to deploy to a container app. So let's create a new project. If I just get the terminal up, we're going to go .NET new. We're going to get a new worker. There we go. So we've created a new worker app in here. And if you're not familiar with worker apps, they inherit from the background service. They're a background service that runs, and they give you this boilerplate code which just does processing. So you can use this if you have a task which is a continuous task that needs to do something over and over again and run all the time. But I will come back to these shortly, worker processes. Let's just make it do something slightly different. Now, once you've got your app, your worker app, you can deploy it using F1, and then you go to Create Container App, and you'll get a very similar set of steps to Visual Studio. These are existing ones, so I want to create a new one. I'll call it worker Mel. Doesn't work. So you have to use an existing one. And the container app name, worker Mel. No. See, this is where you get stuck. It needs to exist already in a Docker image before you try and deploy it. Otherwise, you have to find your image. I haven't tried this actually. We'll see how this goes. So I don't have a Docker file in here. So I do this every time. You can add a Docker file to your workspace in Visual Studio Code if you have I think it's the C# language kit. Console, worker Melb, Linux. There we go. And this crashes every time. So I'm not sure if it's going to work again. It worked yesterday, but if you get stuck, go to Visual Studio and go back again. So this is now deployed. I'll go to the next step. We're just jumping around a bit. I'll just put it in there because I've already got it. And you don't even need to have a Docker image. You can just do the .NET image. And then that will now create the publish profile. Ready to publish. Let's do it. So there's two different ways of creating and deploying your container apps. Obviously, the other way.
Stu.
Yeah.
So just with what you showed there, we can start off with the .NET SDK without having to write a Docker file, but later we can if you really need to customize the image, right?
That's right.
So,
yeah. Yes.
So
you can. Well, I'll go back to Visual Studio in a second. Another instance. It's just publishing.
it's busy.
Yeah, it's still going. This is the thing with it. It's not too slow.
So I'm guessing so it doesn't matter how you build the image with or without a Docker file, as long as it ends up in the container registry.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You make your image, you put it in a container registry. You can put it in Docker Hub or ACR. Now, here we go. All right. There's an error that comes up here, and this happens, but don't worry. Hopefully, it will go away. But that is the Blazor app that I just deployed, that I just published. I'm not sure why this happens. Maybe my VPN or something, but it does come good in the end. Let's see. No. Well, yeah. So this was it, demo 5 Blazor app. We have in here the Azure Container Apps environment and the container app and log analytics workspace, and they should be. I think it must be obviously using the other container app registry. Okay. See if it comes good. Yeah, there you go. It does come good. Hooray.
Right-click in the browser and print QR codes.
I'll not yet. Not yet. I'll we'll get to that. So that was deploying from Visual Studio. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Visual Studio Code a little bit more fiddly, but it will do it. This is yeah. See, this is spinning. I had this work. I mean, it sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. That's just to get the Docker file. If I open this in Visual Studio and then create a Docker file, I can deploy the Docker file, and then I can just deploy the container app from Visual Studio Code. Yeah. So this is for when you want to have an app which is a continuous app. But what I've been using it mostly for is for a kind of scheduled tasks that do a bit of maintenance, clean up your database, or whatever you need to do on a semi-regular basis. And for that, I've been using what's called container app jobs. And for that, I will deploy it in a third way, not in this one. We'll go to Azure and we'll go create a resource, and we'll go container app job. And you have these container app jobs in here, and you can create them there. Actually, what I won't do that. I'm going to do it in Visual Studio just to make sure we get it right. File, new project. And in Visual Studio, you can choose worker service, console app, worker service. Or what we could call this schedule service. Now you have this tick box here for an enable Docker. So Visual Studio will add the Docker file for you and automate all that. But I'm going to untick it accidentally and forget, and then show you what you need to do if you do forget. So again, we have a worker process, and this worker process, get out, make it a bit easier to see. This has got the same boilerplate, but I'm going to get rid of this. And we're going to create a task which is going to run once and then shut down the whole process, the whole container app. And in order to do that, I'm just going to make sure that it shuts down properly. with a iHost application lifetime. That'll do. You just get that all running, and then you do what you need to do, and then you just do application lifetime dot stop application. That's just to make sure that it shuts down completely for the container app instance. Now you do whatever you need to do. I'm going to do logger. Hello, Melbourne. That will go into the log, and then I'll publish this again, but this time to a container app job. Yes, but you don't have the option. So this is where we'll have to do it using the command prompt. Oops. It's coming up on the other screen. Apologies. The one I just created is called schedule service. So cd schedule service. And then what you do is Azure, you use the Azure command prompt. Now I need to get this, just a moment. Oh. It's not there. Here's something I prepared earlier. Here's your AZ container app job create. So you can do the same thing with a container app, you just don't have the job bit there, and a lot of the parameters are the same. I'll just make that a bit bigger. Here's all the things that you have within it. We'll call it scheduled service. We'll just call that. And you set your container app environment. We'll just leave that. And then the trigger type. That's critical. And the different trigger types that you can get are, there's manual, so it doesn't run at all. You have to actually run it. Then there's scheduled at specific times, and then there's event driven. Event driven are a little bit more involved because you have to connect them up with a storage queue or something to trigger those, to trigger the job running. You've got different environment variables and things. I'll get rid of that one. You've got your connection to your registry server and all that kind of thing, which I can't do now. We'll have to leave that bit. But here's one I prepared earlier. Is it this one? Yes. There we go. So this is our container app job, which I deployed earlier using the command prompt, AZ, and you can also use PowerShell. That's your thing. But what I haven't done is gone through the a normal container app. There's a few more options in the normal container app, but just in this container app job, you've really just got your settings which you have your cron trigger, so you can set that to go every minute or however often you need it to run. And then if you go to the logs, you can see it running. This is the column that we care about here, this log S column, and it shows you the setting up the image and deploying the container app itself, and then it starts to run. These are the system logs. So what I'll do, I'll just go to a normal container app, because you get to see a little bit more here. This is the Blazor app we did a minute ago. In here you have a few more options. So there's a log stream, and the system is all that orchestration stuff, and then your console is the actual application logs. So you should see in here the things that your app is doing and logging out. This is obviously the container app, the Blazor app. All right. Okay, are there any questions so far on any of that? Yeah. Yep. Will.
So just in regard, before you didn't create the Docker file, and you were saying that you would
yes.
how was that? Was that a part of the Azure like command line
No
command that you did, or is that
Sorry,
like, something separate?
I forgot. I'm going a bit all over the place. I'll come. So this is the yeah, if you forget to create your Docker file, Visual Studio has a nice easy way to do that, which is add Docker support. This is in the latest Visual Studio 2022, and then you just click it. Make sure you tick Linux, because otherwise you won't be able to use it. And there you go. It creates a Docker file for you, and then you can tweak that however you like. It basically just copies your .NET framework and then your app into a folder. And there's your Docker file. And now you have a Docker file, you can yeah, I can publish it from Visual Studio Code or from here. Yeah.
On the Blazor app that you create, how do you add the secrets to the app? Like, I saw that you can add environment variables, but what about secrets? Like
secrets within an app itself?
Yeah, when it's in production.
Yeah, good question. Let's have a quick look. I'm trying to think actually how you do that. Because
are you asking to do it via Visual Studio or via the portal?
I don't know how.
Well, what I do is I'm not sure if I can show it, but my app itself, if I just go to an app that I like, the worker process, say, in your program.cs, this is where you set up all your stuff in the same way as a similar as a .NET web app. But here you can connect to Key Vault, and that would be the recommended way to do it, because then you just use configuration within the app and it will pick up Key Vault.
I think also in the Azure portal, if you don't want to do it via Key Vault in the app, so
yeah,
in the Azure portal, Stuart,
there is a way, yeah.
The secrets option there in a little bit up there somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. You can have them here within it, and they work.
Yeah, and they just show up some environment variables.
Yeah, that's right. They hide. But yes, so there's a lot of things in here in your container app. We're not going to go into all of them right now, but you can have a play around. Just trying to make sure that I've covered everything before I move on. So that that worker service is now deployed, and it will be it's running on a schedule. The other thing I've prepared earlier is very similar kind of thing with the Blazor app. So I created a web app here, which is exactly what I just showed you, and this web app should be available at this address, and it is. So I'm just going to open the code for this. If I can. We have, I'll open up the whole solution. And what I've done here, this is a little bit more involved. Yeah, sure. Whatever. This has two projects. One of them's an API and one of them's a web app. And the API, it doesn't really do anything. Here's your controller. It's hard-coded random value stuff, which you get out of the box. And it returns your weather forecast. Now, how do you get your web app to talk to your weather API? First of all, well, I deployed them both in the same way. I published them both to Azure exactly the same way. But then, where was it? In here, I've hard coded it on the weather page. So the weather page is now calling directly. This is just for demo purposes. Don't do this. You have the URL for the weather API, which I also deployed. So I'll just open them up. Like on this one. In here, the weather API exposes its application URL here, and you'll see there's a word internal in there. And if we go to the ingress, what I've done is I've limited this API to the container apps environment itself. So only things within the container app environment can access it, which is really, really useful, because now if I was to visit this page, it doesn't work. Look at that on the API. Only the application, the web app itself, can now access that. So that's a really useful tool. Ingress. The one little gotcha that I'll warn you about is that if I was to change this from public to limited, or vice versa, this URL changes. So if you've got it somewhere, it will break, and you might be scratching your head. So that's a little bit about ingress. I'm just going to go back to the slides to see where we're at. We talked about container apps, container app jobs, and the different trigger types. Come on. Come on. Revisions, I'll just talk a little bit about them. They're immutable, so you have a revision, it doesn't change, you get another revision, and it just changes the version. They're automatically provisioned. There's different types of changes that you can have. This is quite advanced. I won't even go into this now. We'll go into that another day. But you can keep a historical record of 100 revisions, and you can run multiple concurrently, and you can also split the traffic between them. So this is quite useful for beta testing. If you have a new change you want to test out on 20% of your audience, you can do that with revisions. Scaling, very, very useful. There's a definition, there are rules, and there is a behavior for scaling. And you update your scaling settings using the CLI with the update command. And I'll just show you what that looks like. So this is for the API. You have scale rules, and we have a HTTP scaler. Let's maybe, I've set this to 10 concurrent HTTP requests. Maybe if I get this, that one, and then create a, how do you do it? Create a QR code. Good old Edge. Right. If anyone wants to hammer that. Oh. We'll see if it scales. I can't. I tried. Look. Sorry. All right. Everyone got it? And just go and click around. So here you can see the weather. It's talking to the actual weather API in the background now. This is not the hard coded. It's the hard coded from the API. All right. So if we get more than 10 concurrent requests, we should go. Now, the best way to see the logs for, remember earlier I showed you the logs for container app jobs. Well, container apps are much, have a much more features, and they have this log stream here. And this is a lot easier to follow. So this should tell me, in fact, it will be on the system, whether we're scaling. Or maybe I'll have to go in here and see. 10 concurrent requests. Maybe they weren't concurrent. In here you can add more scaling rules. Current replicas. If I got a maximum of 1, that's probably why it's not working. 5. Ah, yes. Hang on, I thought I did this. Yeah, I did. Let's just check the rules that exist already, just to make sure. It's this one. Doesn't give you much about it. Yeah, see, the scale rule setting is wrong on this. It's set to 1. All right. Now we're deploying a new revision. If you do still have that link and you want to refresh it, feel free. So what happens when it scales is it gets it up. What happens when you deploy is it gets a new revision, and then once that revision is ready, it will swap it over, so you don't have any downtime whatsoever. And so that's another really good feature of container apps, especially for using for web apps. I think this scaling might not be working right. Haven't played with this a huge amount. All right. It should tell me in here. Okay, we'll come back. Where are we up to? Ingress options. So I've spoke about this. We have the 3 different levels of ingress setting. Hopefully that's all clear. There's also, you can also limit it to within a virtual network, which can be quite useful. And monitoring, we've been through this again. Log streaming, you can see the log streams, and then you have all the other Azure standard ways of looking at your logs. You've got alerts and all that, but you can also call the logs from the API, from the CLI, Azure CLI. But to see the log stream, if you wanted to see it on your machine or something like that. All right, I think that's pretty much it. Just wanted to show everyone really how easy it is to work with them, container apps, and how clean. There's a lot of features there, but you don't have to use them, and there's a lot of really powerful features to it. You use it for hosting entire apps or even smaller processes, worker processes, background services, maintenance. As you've seen, we've deployed it a couple of different ways. It's pretty straightforward. If you are working within Azure DevOps, there is a task for container apps, but I don't think there's one for container app jobs. So I just use the Azure CLI step and then run that CLI command for the jobs. It scales, or it should. There we go. Thank you very much. Like I said, the blog will be up shortly, and it's got all the details, anything that you need to check, all the links, Microsoft Learn, things like that. Thank you, William, for hosting. Thank you, Circuit, and Microsoft for sponsoring. Thank you for having me. Hope you learned something. If I'll stick around. If you've got questions, we'll answer some questions.